If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
This is The Edge.
The advantage it means.
They let guys just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
This is Mark. On today's episode, we read a negative email to Michael Shore. Michael comes through with the Fast 15. We'll talk politics and a few other things, and we'll get into that. Also, David Horsey, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning political cartoonist and columnist, talks about the state of the American electorate, and that essentially we've become just so comfortable with things that bad stuff can happen. The main event is Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore with 8 million monthly views on his YouTube channel. He is a huge hit. He is a nasty firebrand of political blowtorch that is turned on the Democrats primarily in this last election. He feels the Democrats have sold out their base, and they continue to sell them out. He wanted Trump to win so that the Democrats would get the memo that they need to get back to what they were all about. But his bottom line is just burn the whole Democratic Party to the ground. So Jimmy will be the main guest coming up later in the show. I know a lot of people come to our show through iHeartRadio, through KFI Radio in Los Angeles. We appreciate that not everybody's got the same political position. A lot of you are GOPers. A lot of you are just peers. I appreciate you very much being here, no matter what your political position. And if politics isn't your thing, go back and listen, if you haven't, to the guy who was locked up for over 20 years for a murder that he never committed, Carol Leifer, who's so very funny. Go back to the website, spin through, listen to Bobby Slayton. You can also listen to the episode with the guy who discovered Bruno Mars. There's so much cool stuff on our show, and today's no exception. On with the show!
edge-show.com.
edge-show.com.
This is The Edge.
Time for the Fast 15, politics and more with Michael Shore, everybody. Wow!
Hey, thank you all. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Michael, you know, it seems as though the partisan nature of conversation in this country and just the way the world is viewed just never really gets better.
The Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup.
Well,
is that what you're saying? Yeah.
This is the beginning of NHL playoffs, and you have to know Michael Shore is a huge hockey enthusiast.
He's a partisan. He's a Rangers partisan. And when they lose to Montreal in the first round, he'll be a Canadiens partisan.
I got an email about you. I've had a lot of positive emails about you. People like you. They feel that you're even-handed, and they like that we touch on politics a little bit, and they also like that we talk about some other stuff as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to read any of those.
No, read one.
I want to read a negative email.
Let's go.
Here it is. Mark, really enjoyed the first 7 minutes with Michael. The Beyond Meat episode. Remember
we talked about Beyond Meat.
Yeah, and the vitamins and the supplements.
And then
he said Andy Kindler interview was enjoyable as well, which followed you, Andy Kindler.
Right.
Now, those little pesky 7 to 10 minutes in the Michael Shore echo chamber in Capitals and the progressive indivisible agenda goes on, unquestioned, and totally without substantial basis in fact, only opinion.
Wow.
So he goes on and on and on. Now,
signed. Come on. I have my name on here.
His name is Randy.
Okay.
From Palm Desert. When somebody lives in Palm Desert, how could you be in anything but the greatest mood all the time?
Right. Well, because it's damn hot there a lot.
It's hot, but it's not hot right now.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not hot enough to write an email like that. But I know what you mean. But also, you're pretty far from a direct flight to anywhere, right? I mean, unless you want to fly.
Well, I got Palm Springs as an airport.
Palm Springs is an airport. But I mean, if you want to go to, I don't know, New York, you're stopping, I think.
Right. But that just kind of goes with the territory.
It does. No, I'm trying to think of things that are not good about living in the desert.
I truly think Palm Desert would be like a great place to be, and especially right now. The deserts in California, if you don't know, in another month or so, it gets really hot. And then, of course, the summer gets just, surface of the sun hot.
Right. But it used to be much more temperate till they built all of the golf courses out there, which of course is the reason a lot of people move there and travel there in the first place. But because of all the flora and fauna there that the golf courses create, especially the grass, it makes it even hotter. It is desert, so it used to control its own temperature, but now that condensation, I don't know obviously the science behind it, but that was I learned that it used to be, if you went there 50 years ago, it would be far different than it is today.
I think it's also more humid now. Maybe that's...
the humidity is what it has to
right.
do.
So
That's exactly right.
It feels...
And for fear of upsetting Randy, there might be some climate change going on as well.
Yeah,
but
Randy, I like to have some dissenting opinions on. And one of the things I like about Michael Shore, who's here, is I feel as though Michael is fairly even-handed. I mean, if you listen to the lead up to the election, he hauls the Democrats over the coals and he hauls the GOP over the coals. I think that, I'm not going to pretend, of course, I'm up front. I'm very much concerned with the environment and the planet and all these things. So you know my biases on this show, but I also try to entertain any conversation that's sensible and approaches from the standpoint of information. And that's kind of what we try to do. So,
I don't expect everyone to agree with me, because not everybody agrees with anything, and I don't agree with everyone on anything. But, I have certain things that I see in politics that I think are beneficial to both sides of the spectrum, and even the far ends of both spectrums.
Help me calibrate something that happened this week. Tell us what happened with Sean Spicer. So he was trying to talk about how bad the Syrian use of gas was.
Of chemical weapons.
Okay. Yeah. And so Assad uses chemical weapons, and he's trying to amplify that point by
saying that even Hitler didn't use them. He wouldn't stoop so low as to use chemical weapons on his own people, which of course is an absurd framing of history, because it's not true, and it's not true with an exclamation point. First of all, everyone in politics knows one rule: compare nothing ever, ever, ever to the Holocaust, or no one to Adolf Hitler. Because even if you are right, and there may be someone who's right about something in a small way, this is, Hitler wrote books about this too, right? Don't say it. Right? Don't say it, because no one has ever prospered from comparing anyone to the Holocaust or Hitler in modern politics. That said, and Spicer should know that, he ran he ran communications for one of the two major parties in American politics. But the other side of it, he went further. He called it, rather than call them camps, detention centers or anything, he called them Holocaust centers. He was so ill-prepared to speak about it and compare Assad. And he took a lot of, I think, well-deserved flack for it, and I think that he apologized appropriately, too.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of it as a mistake?
I say it's a 10 mistake. If you were the press secretary for the White House, that is a 10 mistake, right, for your job.
You should be able to handle yourself more deftly around that kind of thing.
You should, and you should have the wherewithal not to go even deeper, which is what he did with it.
But to be fair to him, the apology also on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think it was a 7 apology, an 8 apology. Why is it not a 10 apology? It's not a 10 apology because he went to Sheldon Adelson and apologized directly to Sheldon Adelson, according to Adelson's office. And he's the financier, casino mogul, and he is a big donor to the party and supporter of Trump. So the notion that he went, and a big, big, big supporter of Israel, the notion that he went to that person personally, that I found that to be disconcerting. Go where the money is all the time, right? But he did make on TV, he owned up to what he did because it was so obviously wrong, but he did it, I think, in an admirable way. But that doesn't erase all the things that are wrong, in my estimation, about Sean Spicer and having put him in that job. He, to me, is a microcosm of that administration.
Okay, so I want to follow up on that in a second, but he was sincere. I mean, this isn't a guy who's a Jew hater up there looking to minimize the Holocaust in any way. I mean, I just don't buy that.
First of all, I don't know enough about Sean Spicer to say I presume he's not a Jew hater.
Well,
right?
I'm just saying that based on what we know. I mean,
right, exactly. I presume he is not. I'm not even flirting with the idea that he is. But he misspoke, and I don't think even his misspeak indicates that he's a Jew hater or a Holocaust denier. He just did a poor job of communicating, and that's what his job is.
You said that you think he's a microcosm of this administration. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that this administration, from the president on down, with the exception, I think, of his Defense Department, people like James Mattis and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and Dunsford and those people, I think, are excellent and the type of people that any Republican president would put in to place. But I think there's so many people who are ill-suited for the jobs that they've been given, from the president, excluding the vice president, because he is, he's a vice president, fine, capable, elected, former governor, that's who wins, right? But when you go below that, when you look at the other departments, from Rex Tillerson at State to, I think, Stephen Mnuchin at Treasury, to Ben Carson at HUD, to Betsy DeVos at Education, these are people that are ill-suited for the jobs that they have. Jared Kushner, who has every job that I didn't mention, right? He's the jack of all trades. He's the handyman. He's 36 years old. He has never done anything in politics in his life. He has never done anything in negotiations or reaching out to other countries. He ran his father's business. Why? Because his father was in prison at the time that he ran his business. I'm sure he's a good businessman. I'm sure he's a better businessman than I am, but I'm not criticizing him for being a businessman. I'm criticizing him for being charged for going to Iraq, for being charged with Mideast peace and Mexico truce and all of that. You look at Sean Spicer. Sean Spicer is not made for this job of TV and press secretary. It just isn't right. And he's among the least egregious of them, but he is certainly one of them.
What's Sean Spicer's background?
Sean Spicer he ran communications at the Republican National Committee. After a debate in Boulder, Colorado in 2015, it was a CNBC debate, if I'm not mistaken, and the Trump people were incensed by how it went, how it was spun afterwards. They demoted Sean Spicer to, working, I don't know exactly what he was. He was an overseer of something within the RNC, but he wasn't the director of communications anymore. And then he sort of endeared himself to Trump and the Trump people as it went along. And somebody who was, the RNC was not warm to Trump at the very beginning. And, it could be argued they never warmed to Trump. I mean, one small anecdote, on election night, I was at Trump's headquarters in New York, and I went into the RNC room where the RNC mucky mucks were there before the results came in. And it was almost jubilant in there. And I was curious, or are they optimistic that Trump's winning? They were coy about it, right? They were happy, they were saying, by some of the Senate results that they were hearing from exit polls. I walked in after Trump won to see what it was like in that holding room. There were fewer people, and it was somber. The RNC was not happy about Donald Trump winning. They wanted to dispatch with him. Not every single one of them, but as a group. And so Spicer was part of that group, that didn't know what to do with Trump, right? Then, of course, he endeared himself, as a lot of people did, to the Trump people. They needed RNC help. They needed cooperation with the Republican National Committee, and he ended up being the press person there after, some other names were floated.
He has a communications background, right?
He does, yeah. I mean, nobody, listen, this is a really tough job, the one he has. And he has the toughest version of this job that we've seen in a long time. I mean, maybe since Ron Ziegler was Richard Nixon's spokesperson there. Maybe Mike McCurry in the aftermath of the Lewinsky stuff. But every day this is a very tough job, because this White House holds the press. They just don't like the press at all right? And it's pretty clear that Donald Trump does not trust them, made enemies of them made them out to be enemies on the campaign trail. And what do you have to do? You have to have somebody there who engages the press every day. It's a very difficult job for Spicer. I don't think he's doing it very well.
We only have a minute or two left, and I wanted to get to some other stuff. Can you help with something that's like pure politics? I'm talking about this Kansas race that the Democrats lost, okay? But explain why that Kansas race is important and what the hell was going on there.
Yeah, well, Mike Pompeo, he was a congressman from the Freedom Caucus from Kansas's 4th District. He joined the administration to run intelligence, run CIA there. So they had a special election for it. This was a district that Donald Trump won by 27 points. And last night, the Republicans held on to that seat by 7 points. It is an unbelievably Republican district. If a Democrat, Thompson, had won last night, he certainly would have lost in 2 years. This was a reflection, though, not so much of Donald Trump as people wanted to read into it, as it was of Sam Brownback, the governor in Kansas, who has sort of reneged on, who's went into tax cuts, but then also cut so many services in that state. There's a lot of resentment towards Sam Brownback. That's a little bit deep, but it's important, because this was not necessarily a reaction to Donald Trump as the Democrats wanted to paint it. Afterwards, Democrats were fighting amongst each other. They outdid what Donald Trump did. They were supposed to lose by 27 points. They lost by 7. They overperformed by 20 points. And Democrats are mad at each other because they said, well, if they'd gone even more progressively, they would have won the seat.
You're saying they're having that dialogue openly now.
Openly amongst themselves. And the most progressive elements of the Democratic Party are fighting with most establishment parts of the party, saying that if you steered us toward progressivism, we would have won that seat. There's so much we would have won that goes on right now. There's an election next Tuesday in Atlanta for the seat vacated by Tom Price, who's now the Secretary of Health and Human Services, that a Democrat could win. And if that's the case, it will be more a reflection on Donald Trump. That they're getting close is really encouraging for Democrats. They should not discourage this. They should not discourage that there are so many House seats that are going to be up next year that are within a margin of error that is negligible, that they could win if they performed as they did in Kansas last night. They don't let themselves see what's good that's going on right now. And that's the politics of it. So Democrats could hurt themselves as Republicans have done, and Democrats have mocked Republicans for having done over and over. This was a good night for Democrats, even though they lost by 7 points.
It's interesting because in the run-up to the presidential election, we were having that conversation on this show that I felt it was so clear. The left, I didn't mean the Democrats, because I mean, a lot of us end up as Democrats. It's kind of like I'm a Democrat, but there's a lot about the Democrats I don't like at all. It's just that I don't feel like the GOP really represents what I think is important either. But I see them.
Mark, I just have to interrupt. There are a lot of Republicans who say what you say too. I can't stand the religion in the Republican Party and how the right has such a hold on us on guns and religion. But the Democrats are so distasteful to me, I'm not going to vote for them.
Right, exactly. No, I think there's a Mark Thompson on the GOP side and one on the Democrat side. And I guess I was saying that just though the left, it seems, before in the run-up to the presidential election, they really dirtied up each other. I mean, It was especially, I think that the gas on that fire was Bernie Sanders, of course.
Right.
So,
But Bernie Sanders brought a lot of good to that party too, and he, in terms of the election, he's an independent.
I thought he brought everything good to that election.
Yeah, I do. I think that. I mean, listen, I would have. I don't think everything good. I don't think that the Democrats lost solely for one reason, right? I think there were myriad reasons why the Democrats lost, but that was part of it because there was infighting, and that infighting brought a lack of interest, especially when you have an over-optimistic electorate. Oh, I'm not going to vote for her. She's going to win anyway, but at least I won't take a part in electing her, right? So people stayed home. That's one element that happens. But yeah, the infighting on the Democratic Party is going to hurt them. It already has.
I wish we had more time to get into other stuff. When you come back next time, we'll just go about the other stuff. We won't talk politics at all, maybe.
How about that? All right.
Because we're out of time this time, but I will tell you, though, I'd like to leave you a little morsel. You have an iPhone?
We talked hockey, by the way.
Oh, we did. You're right.
Yeah, for a second.
Android or Apple, as you know, there's Apple Pay, there's Android Pay, and your fingerprint is the thing that unlocks the paywall and allows you to make that transaction work.
Right.
Sometimes it'll allow you to unlock your phone if you have one of the newer iPhones, etc. Apparently, that fingerprint can be duplicated now by computer. It's not as secure a way to get into your phone as you thought.
The most secure thing in the world.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't use my fingerprint.
You don't?
No. But not for that reason, just because I just never dealt with it.
There are new findings that were just published this week that suggest that fake fingerprints that are digitally composed of a lot of common features that are found in like different human prints.
Loops and such.
Right. In computer simulations, researchers were able to create these master prints and get into these different phones.
That's amazing.
So I leave you all with that from Michael Shore, and we will get into more next time. I love you. We're going to go spend the weekend in Palm Desert with Randy.
You know what? I love Randy, too. I
Yeah.
mean, listen, I can be disagreed with, and he liked the Beyond Meat segment. So, so I batted 500 with Randy.
Michael Shore!
Thanks, guys. Thank you all.
Very excited to welcome a Pulitzer Prize winner. It is David Horsey from the LA Times. He's a cartoonist. He's a columnist. First of all, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
There's nothing about you that wouldn't suggest you're humble. But just to keep you humble, I want you to know you're not the only Pulitzer Prize winner who's ever been on the show. We have had others.
Well, that shows you have a distinguished lineup.
And at the Pulitzer meeting, you can mention you've been on the show, and a few people will, actually know what you're talking about.
People actually knew how Pulitzers are decided. They might figure out it's actually like being hit by lightning. It's more random than you think.
There's a committee, right?
Well, I guess you have to stand out in the field and expose yourself to the lightning. So it's not, but especially for cartooning, it's a subjective thing. There are a lot of people doing a lot of good work all the time. So lucky to have been one of them who got recognized.
I would think the tough thing about cartooning is that you have to find the subject matter, and as you say, then your joke or whatever your point is has to resonate with the right people, and that's always weird because humor or whatever other things you're doing just is sort of an individual thing.
Yeah, well, as far as finding subjects, especially these days, there's no problem there. But the fact is that with every cartoon I do, I know I'm going to offend at least half of the people who see it, no matter how clever or funny I may be. So that kind of goes with the territory that it's a form of journalism that is guaranteed to offend readers.
Yeah, there's some great stuff, and we're going to have a link to it on our website, edge-show.com. Those who are listening on Overcast and iTunes and Stitcher and iHeartRadio and all the other places that we're heard, be aware that if you go to our parent website, edge-show.com, we'll have a click-through so you can see some of David Horsey's stuff. And it was one of your editorials that really got me, and the piece I'm talking about was about apathy. And it was sort of a suggestion that, because there's so many things that are being pointed to, Hillary Clinton didn't visit this state or that state, the electoral process has failed us. This is the oligarchy run amok even more than it had run amok, all of which may be true. But I thought you pointed out something that we've always known. It's sort of an undertow of not really caring in this country and just kind of assuming things will go along.
Well, I guess to make it short, I mean, the fact is, we've all kind of gotten used to, progress in this country continuing at a predictable rate. It shifts every few years between Republicans and Democrats, but in foreign policy and in a lot of ways, there's a general trend. And so I think a lot of people, whatever their politics are, kind of just haven't bothered to pay attention that much in recent years and just figured, well, we've got a lot of lazy citizens, I guess is how you'd put it. It's because it seemed like most of the big issues were settled. And I think with the rise of Trump, at least for a lot of people, it's like, wait a minute. None of this stuff is guaranteed, and citizens actually have to be engaged and active, and you got to pay attention. And and that's shown up, if only in the ratings of cable news programs now. The interest has not waned since the election. People want to know what's going on. It's like we're all binge watching this new reality show that happens to be based in the White House.
And there was, in a weird way, a kind of perverse fun that the whole thing had on the ramp up, because it seemed such a foregone conclusion that this guy couldn't actually win. He seemed utterly unqualified, probably unable to even tell you how government works. So when the task of governance actually was to arrive once president, he'd have no clue. And then the argument to that was, no, but he'll hire smart people. And then there began to be sort of some counter arguments to all the, well, there's no way he can win. And then, as you say, before you know it, the horse is out of the barn.
Right.
But what about the people who say, no, David, no, you're wrong. The fact is, this was an energized electorate. They were energized to get Washington away from that crap that they perceived as just more of the same, which you talk about. And they stepped up and they voted for this guy.
Yeah, well, that is exactly true. The problem, and obviously there are a lot of people who would call me an idiot for saying this, but the problem with so many of the Trump voters, as they are finding themselves now, is they were acting on a gut impulse, not on information. The impulse to say, man, this is not working and it should be better is not at all a stupid thing. That was very true. The problem was it coincided with this fellow arriving who said all sorts of things that resonated with these people, said all the right things, but it was all just talk to him. He's a salesman and he doesn't know how to get stuff done. I mean, you don't have to look at liberals to critique Trump. I mean, some of the harshest stuff is coming from conservatives just saying, this fellow is incompetent. What apart from tweeting and everything else, he just doesn't know what he's doing, and he's sort of trying to turn the White House into a family business. I mean, Jared Kushner is really the deputy president these days, and which may be not as bad as Steve Bannon being the assistant deputy president. But so you're right. There was this energy.
You're saying they were misguided, and they essentially.
Well, it was indirect. Although there are Trump voters who are perfectly happy with the way things are going, but there are a lot of. It's really talking about kind of the working class guys who they're too busy just trying to live their lives and struggle with it. They're not reading newspapers, watching TV, although they may be listening to Rush Limbaugh too much. But they're not sophisticated voters. But their impulse that, man, I don't like a lot of the stuff that's going on was not wrong. It's just that the direction they've sent us in is not helping them or any of us.
Well, you did a piece about the coal industry. And by the way, just to follow up on something you said, we talked a bit about Jared Kushner in the last episode, but on your small business point, we also mentioned this, and I'll just quickly reiterate for those who hadn't heard it. The Trump businesses are run like small businesses. If you look back in history at the Trump organization, he ran his casinos in Atlantic City like family businesses. Everything was done by a very small sort of coterie of people. And he runs those businesses such that he builds competition in there the way you'd almost build sibling rivalry. And it's led to the demise of all those hotels in Atlantic City. They all went bankrupt.
Yeah. So he was elected by people who watched too much of The Apprentice. And, he plays the part of a master businessman very well. But when you look at what he's actually done, he's not been all that successful. And they really have been. They're not giant corporations, small-time business. And he seems to not be able to break out of that. And in the White House now, he's surrounded himself with family members and old cronies and so these fawning minions who will justify everything he does, no matter what he does.
If his family members and cronies were really smart, capable people, all the better. I mean, it's not as though you have to cull all the college campuses or you don't have to go on LinkedIn to put together your cabinet. You do it any way you want. If they're capable people, they happen to be rich or they happen to know you, fine. Frankly, that's been the case with a lot of cabinets prior to him. I want to ask you. I want to ask you about a piece you did, though. I thought you did a really great drill down on environmental laws and the fact that coal miners will not be helped by all of this well-advertised legislation and all these sweeping moves to help the coal industry.
Well, there are a couple of things. In fact, there are environmentalists who are sort of chuckling about this because they're not all that worried about this shift to coal because nobody wants to buy coal. I mean, it's natural gas and other sources of power have essentially replaced coal. Coal is dirty and it's more expensive than other things. And to the extent the coal industry has stayed alive, it's done it through mechanization. So there aren't that many coal jobs left, for one thing. Like 70,000, something like that. And the companies that are surviving are going to more and more use machines. We're not going to return to 1900 when the world was much different. And I think it's a sort of a cruel thing to promise these guys that it's all going to come back because economically it's just not going to happen. No matter how policy has changed.
As you say, there's 70,000 jobs. This is from your column left in the coal industry. That compares with 650,000 jobs in the burgeoning renewable energy field. So,
and a huge number of those jobs are in California. So to suddenly favor coal miners in Kentucky actually endangers far more jobs than will possibly be brought back in the coal industry.
And the reason coal is in a slump is economic.
Yeah. I mean, it's been blamed on, environmental regulations and government policy, and that may, I think, as I said in my column, that probably inhibited some of the companies that wanted to just rape the land and not have safe mines and all that. But the biggest problem is simply that the economy has changed and the world of energy has changed, and renewables are coming on, and big corporations understand that, and so nobody wants to buy this stuff.
Now, David, what do you see for the first thing that really brought us to the party here today, which was your comment about what's happened to the voter, the uninformed or generally apathetic or everything just sucks, so let me just pull the lever for this other guy who may be able to shake it up. What do you think will happen? And then how do you handicap this administration going forward?
Wow. Well, I'm not sure what will happen. It'd be nice to think that a lot of people will see the error of their ways and look for a little more sane choice. I mean, it doesn't have to be a Democrat. I mean, there are plenty of smart Republicans out there. But I don't actually expect that to happen very quickly. People have a really tough time. All human beings have a tough time admitting, I got tricked or I got bamboozled or, I made the wrong choice. We'll cling to our choices for a long time. But I think there are enough people already. I mean, Trump's popularity is down to 35% or something like that. You can't get reelected with 35%. So there's so many things in the air right now, so many issues that have become hot points of contention. It's hard to say where it will all go, but at the moment, whether you're a conservative or a liberal or whatever, it's hard to see how the incompetence will allow this administration to be successful. So I don't know exactly what thing is going to really do Trump in. I don't like that phrase, actually.
No, but I know what you're saying, like where it's demonstrably the case that the administration is a failure.
Yeah, right, yeah. I don't know what that will be. There's so many possibilities. But
plus, everything is spun now such that, even if something bad happens, it's like, well, what happened? Look at what I was left with by the Obama administration policies prior in North Korea, in Syria, et cetera.
Yeah. So not everyone there'll never be a situation where everyone changes their mind. But already there are enough people who have their doubts that, if there's I actually wouldn't be surprised if there was a Republican challenger to Trump in the next election, if it goes as badly as it appears it will.
Well, I want to talk about next time maybe who the Democrats may have on the bench. It certainly looks like a pretty thin lineup, but
that's a really good question, because at the moment it looks like a JV team.
And I also want to talk to you about, I think, the power of what really is political theater. I think that's the thing that more and more wins elections, and that's why Trump was able to sell this lie. In my view, it's a lie that this businessman thing we're talking about, because I think it is. You have to find somebody who can run well, not just administrate well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd be happy to talk about any of those things.
I hope we'll get a chance to visit again.
Okay.
See you. Thanks again. David Horsey, spelled Horsey. There's a link to some of his stuff on our website at edge-show.com. The Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist and columnist, David Horsey.
I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. And if you haven't already, why don't you show your support and subscribe? What's the matter with you? Go to Edge Show. Oh, it's Edge dash. What's with the dash? Stupid. All right, I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. Show your support and leave something on their website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?
edge-show.com.
Regular listeners to our show know he is one of our favorites. You know him from his own channel, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. He has 8 million views a month on the channel. It is the Jimmy Dore channel because he is Jimmy Dore!
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with a guy who knows about the news, who's informed.
Well, I try to be, but you're the real, I always call you the firebrand. You're the guy who really screams the truth the loudest.
Well, it's amazing how complacent people can get. This is not normal. What's happening? This is outrageous. What's happening in our culture, in our economy, in our government, and people should be screaming a lot louder. So yeah, I try to wake people up, and I let myself.
Talk about the media, and there's so many different places to get the news. As you click up, you got your CNN and MSNBC and Fox, just for the big 3 cable networks. And by the way, just because I mentioned them, how loathsome was it? This past Saturday, Mike Pence was giving a speech in Ohio, and I'm just flipping around to the 3 networks. All of those big cable networks I just mentioned, they were all covering the Mike Pence speech in Ohio. It was being covered wall to wall as though it was some major address. He was talking about jobs, but it wasn't a major address by the president on jobs, nor was it a major address from the current administration on jobs. It was a time filler, which is what they need to do on those networks, is fill time.
They don't seem to have a problem filling it with bullshit, I'll tell you that, right?
When I mention them, saying we have all these different sources of news, so we leave those aside because those are not really different sources of news. They're all slices from the same pie.
Correct. So it's that would be called what we would call, and on YouTube, we call them establishment media. Mm-hmm. And people got a good look at the establishment media in the Democratic primary. So we had a populist running named Bernie Sanders, and he was a real progressive, and he was threatening to take government away from corporations and actually have it work for the people. And they couldn't have that. Either party, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and especially the establishment media couldn't have that. So if you're going to get money out of politics, that's a lot of money that the media makes on politics, and they don't want to get the money out of politics. In fact, I played on my show a recording of the guy who runs CBS. Les Moonves was caught on an open microphone saying during the campaign that Trump is bad for America, but he's great for CBS's ratings, and everybody laughed. And not only that, but they cheered, right? And so he's like, yeah, it's bad, but it's good for us. So the establishment media, the way they covered Bernie Sanders, if you were into Bernie Sanders, you saw how they covered him, which was unfairly. They slanted everything. They smeared him. And to the point where they called him everything in the book, a sexist. His followers were violent. They threw chairs in Arizona. That none of that should happen. He's the most progressive guy in the world. He chained himself to black women in the 60s when Hillary Clinton was out working for a right-winger, Goldwater. And so people saw what happened.
Well, let me ask you.
And so they see through even MSNBC, because they're all owned by the 5 big 6 corporations. And Comcast owns MSNBC, which is very pro-TPP. And when Ed Schultz started talking about it, they fired him. Just like when Phil Donahue talked about the Iraq War in the right way, they fired him.
So, but what do you say, Jimmy, to people who say, hey, why does apart from those examples you just gave about TPP and the Iraq War, why does the media stand to lose if Bernie Sanders is president? Meaning, why is the establishment losing? I'm talking about just the media now, because you're talking about media coverage. Why are they losing if Bernie Sanders wins? They're still going to be covering him. They're still going to have shows.
Right. So he upsets the apple cart because he's about getting corporate power away from government. So they want to keep corporate power in government. He wants to get corporate money out of government. They want to keep corporate money in government. So that's why they don't want Bernie Sanders.
I might add one more thing.
So, and by the way, it's a boon, a political advertising. I mean, Hillary Clinton spent $2 billion herself on political advertising. So
getting money out of politics is certainly something that the mainstream media does
not want. They want money in politics.
And I would also add that something that's happened, and it's really, this horse is out of the barn. I don't know that, and I really think it's our undoing. And I've been saying this for, I want to say 15 years, if not longer. The complete consolidation now of media has destroyed the plurality of opinion that you hear, but it's also destroyed a lot of other great things about this country. So when you turn on the television, when you listen to the radio, even when you go on the internet, because it's happening on the internet as well, huge conglomerates are becoming more conglomeratized. They are now allowed to merge, almost unfettered.
Well, it's not only, yes, there's certainly that. And when that happened in 1996, when Bill Clinton, a Democrat, passed the Telecommunications Act, which took away all the rules that used to be around media, like a same company can't own multiple radio stations and a TV station and a newspaper in the same market.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Don't mean to interrupt, but one of the reasons for that has to do with the people's need to get plurality of opinion.
So the airways are considered a public property, and when you're renting them, if you're a TV station or if you're a radio station, and so you rent them, right? And so you have to operate in the public interest, is what the idea used to be. And so they understood that you needed competition, and there was a diversity of opinion, and we couldn't just let one corporation own all of media.
So you could look at the paper, and it wouldn't be the same thing you're going to hear on the news station, which is owned by the paper type
right,
thing.
Exactly. And so, we all saw Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and we see what's happening right now in America with this Russia stuff, and this was a huge distraction from our real problems. Right now, you still can't get clean water in Flint, Michigan. But we're going to talk about Russia until we're blue in the face. And let's remember, Russians aren't communists anymore. That's why we were supposed to be afraid of Russia, because they were going to take over our country, infiltrate us with an ideology, and they were going to do it through our unions. And that's why there was the big Red Scare, and that's why we had the House Un-American Activities Committee, and that's why they would send FBI guys to schools and ask for the union representatives and blacklist them. That's why, because it was a Red Scare. Communism's going to take over. It's an ideology. ideology. Well, guess what? They're not communists anymore. They're frickin' capitalists. So what are they going to do? Invade our country and spread capitalism in America? So that's why all this stuff is really, really propaganda. Is Trump corrupt? Yes. Is it any different if he was corrupted by a French oligarch or an Italian oligarch? No.
It's funny, the Russia thing has worked so effectively as a decoy, you know.
But
Russia, because Russia has this radioactive sense about it, you know. Go ahead, make your point. Sorry.
No, I just did a live show last night at the Improv, and I played a videotape of all the Democrats making fun of Mitt Romney in 2012 when he said that Russia was our number one geopolitical foe. And everybody, from Barack Obama to Madeleine Albright, to Joe Biden, to everybody, to Joe Scarborough, ridiculed Mitt Romney about that statement he made about Russia being, and they go, hey, you know, you're stuck in the 80s. You're stuck fighting the Cold War. That's been over for a long time. And now all of a sudden, when it suits them politically, so before it suited them politically to say we weren't in a Cold War, now it suits them to say Russia's a big threat, and they're saying it. It's crazy.
Okay, now what about this, though, Jimmy? I don't want any other country, Russia or other, to meddle in our election. That's the reason this is so important.
So people don't also understand what you mean by that. When you say meddle in our election, people think, what did they do? Did they hack into our machines and flip votes? No. The accusation is that Russia hacked into John Podesta's email and then gave those emails to WikiLeaks, and then WikiLeaks revealed them. And what did they reveal? They revealed that the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign were working in collusion and were corrupt. That's what that revealed. So the way Russia screwed with our election was showing that the DNC was screwing with our election. Right. And that's the thing they don't talk about. And that's why they're talking about Russia, because they don't want to talk about what got revealed in those emails. And by the way, there's no evidence that Russia had anything to do with that. And you don't think, Mark, now it's 6 months after or 5 months after the election, and they have every email, every phone call, every text you send, and they have no evidence. And so if they did, they would show it and they would leak it. We would know about it. There isn't any evidence yet. And so that tells me there isn't going to be any. And this is a huge distraction. And by the way, it's people willing to start World War III to promote their own careers. That's what Donna Brazil's doing. That's what Neera Tanden's doing. That's what they're willing to risk, literally a war with Russia. Because I don't know if people know what's happening. NATO is ramping up like crazy. Estonia, Poland.
There are NATO exercises going on within 100 yards.
The Black Sea. If you look at a map of where all our bases are and we're sending foot soldiers to places now. So, and let me tell you something else. You guys are afraid of Russia? You know Russia, how much they spend on their military? They spend about $64 billion a year on their military. You know how much the United States spends? I don't know, $800 billion on our military. Trump wants to ramp it up by $54 billion, just like that, which ironically is how much it would cost to send everybody to college tuition free.
Yeah, by the way, this is one of the great things, just to skip around a little bit. I laugh in a sad way at the new budget proposals from the president and the administration because of, obviously, as Jimmy says, the military getting so much, because he talks about getting rid of the waste and abuse. Now, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I know a lot of people who work in government, and a lot of people who have worked in government through the years. If you want waste and abuse, you have found the absolute epicenter of waste and abuse at the Pentagon. There is more money being wasted on weapons systems, on bureaucracy, on administrative bureaucracy. And so the idea that that could somehow coexist, that is to say, I want to get rid of waste and abuse, that idea can coexist with, but I'm going to take care of the thing that's most important, the Pentagon. It's laughable. It just is laughable. So, I mean, in addition to all the other things, I just feel as though it doesn't pencil out on that level alone. But what Jimmy's saying is so important because we really are teetering in a way on a military confrontation here with Russia. And it is odd, and I consider myself a good American, but I'm not troubled by the Russia thing, just as Jimmy says. This is something to throw us off the scent, I think. There's a lot of theater around this that is designed to allow a lot of other stuff to go on, and the media just won't pay attention to it.
Well, I keep asking people, what's the accusation that you're making against Trump? What is the accusation? That He's somehow in bed with Putin to what? Overthrow the United States government? He's already in control of the United States government. What is I don't understand. They go, well, he's corrupted by so it's normal corruption that he took money from an old oligarch who's a criminal. They all are, by the way. And he's in real estate, one of the shadiest businesses in the world anyway. I don't understand. So this is normal corruption you're talking about? Yeah. All right. And this idea that they hacked into our election. So don't let them say that. And they're calling it an act of war. That's what the Democrats are doing now. They're now calling it an act of war, which they have no evidence for, which it's the height of irresponsibility to be doing what they're doing. And people don't see it that way because they turn on the TV and everybody's afraid of Russia. They look on the New York Times. And by the way, let's not forget the New York Times and the Washington Post totally bullshitted us into an Iraq war. Totally bullshitted us into a. You want to talk about fake news? I just read an editorial from the editorial board of the Washington Post on my show that happened right before we went into Iraq. And what they said was, it is hard to imagine anybody still doubting that they have weapons of mass destruction. That's a direct quote from the editorial board of the Washington Post. Now, I remember the Iraq war. I knew it was bullshit. You knew it was bullshit. There were 1 million people in the street who knew it was bullshit. But somehow the editorial board of the Washington Post, they got it 1,000% wrong. They got duped by George W. Bush. And so did the New York Times, by the way, who had printed lies above the fold on the front page about weapons of mass destruction that came direct from Dick Cheney's mouth to Judith Miller's ear and went right to the front page. And nobody got in trouble. Nobody got fired. In fact, Judith Miller got an on-air host job at Fox News.
I just saw that. The rehabilitation of Judith Miller is another one of those amazing things to me. She pulled one over and was responsible, as Jimmy says, I think, in swaying a lot of public opinion. When she wrote a column about the Iraq war or ramping up to it, it came with a lot of authority. You know, it was quite believable.
They put it on the front page, Mark, above the fold. They put it on there about the aluminum tubes and the weapons of mass destruction. And we turned out her source was Dick Cheney. And then Dick Cheney would go on TV and he would cite the New York Times. He would say, well, even the New York Times has reported this, knowing he planted the goddamn story. So you start to see how this works? Do people not read manufacturing consent? Do they not understand that the establishment media is there to forward the agenda of the neoliberal class? It's not there to help workers. It's not there to help the environment. It's not there to help regular people. The establishment media is not there to tell you the truth or the news about what's happening in the world. It's there to forward propaganda. And as soon as you're done forwarding propaganda, they are done with you, which is why Cenk Uygur is done with MSNBC, which is why Phil Donahue is done with MSNBC. By the way, Phil Donahue got the Iraq war right. You think they'd have him on every goddamn day. Here's the guy who got it right. Tell us what's going on now, Phil. You never see Phil Donahue. Who do you see on MSNBC? Everybody who got it wrong. Bill Kristol and all those other jagoffs sitting around Morning Joe. All those guys got it wrong, including Chris Matthews, and they still have jobs. Who doesn't? The people who got it right. Phil Donahue, by the way, had the highest rated show on MSNBC, and they fired him for low ratings because he was against the Iraq war. He didn't have low ratings. He had the highest ratings on the goddamn channel.
When you say the neoliberals, what do you mean?
Okay, so
you're saying the neoliberals are responsible for
so the
corporates,
the people who have given our sovereignty of government over to corporations. And it used to be, I think I've told this on this show before, it used to be that there was the party that represented workers or claimed to, the FDR party, right? The party of the workers, unions, stuff like that was the Democrats. And then there was the party of the white collar workers and big business, and that was the Republicans. And then they would have an election, and you'd have two different ideologies combating each other or fighting it out for the vote. Well, that happened this last election in 2016. That dynamic where you had the worker representative fighting against the corporation representative, that happened inside the Democratic primary. So instead of having two worker people compete, we had exactly what used to happen in the general election happen inside the Democratic primary. So the neoliberals are the corporatists who've taken away our sovereignty, and that's what the TPP is. The TPP gives up sovereignty. So if you pass a law in your state that says you can't bring an oil tanker into our thing without the right and they can sue us. And they don't get to sue us in the United States court. The corporation will then sue us in an international court that's not even a court. It's appointed by the corporation's lawyers. It's like arbitration. It's bullshit. And who do you think's going to win that arbitration? So it's all about giving sovereignty over from the people. That's why they're afraid of Bernie Sanders. And people won't believe this, but this is true. The Democrats would rather lose to Donald Trump than win with Bernie Sanders. And that is a fact. because their first order of business was to defeat the agenda of working class. Once the Democrats got in bed with Wall Street, you cannot serve two masters. You can't say I'm sticking up for workers and unions and I'm working for Wall Street. So they decided to take Wall Street cash, and that was the end of them sticking up for unions, which is why they passed NAFTA, which is why they repealed the New Deal banking legislation, which hurt who? The fucking people. It didn't hurt the oligarchs or the rich people or the bankers. They all got bailed out and we all lost our houses because Barack Obama's one of them. And then when we elect, here's what perfect example of neoliberalism. When we elected a left-wing government in our heads, we thought it was left-wing. We had a Democratic Congress, a Democratic Senate, and a Democrat in the White House, Barack Obama. Complete control of government. And what did they do? They gave us a right-wing health care plan anyway. We got what the corporation was going to give us anyway.
Right. It was a gift to insurance companies.
We got it. So what's the point of voting for fucking Democrats?
And Glass-Steagall.
So they repealed Glass-Steagall's banking regulations, and within 10 years, the whole goddamn economy went fucking belly up.
And who repealed it?
And Bill Clinton repealed it.
Bill Clinton.
So Bill Clinton,
a Democrat.
So these are things that the Republicans could never have gotten done. They couldn't have gotten that crime bill through. They couldn't have repealed NAFTA. In fact, they couldn't have passed NAFTA, which in fact they tried to pass NAFTA, and they couldn't do it because the Democrats stood up against them and a lot of the moderate Republicans. And then when Bill Clinton becomes president, he then gives all those corporate Democrats cover. Oh, well, the Bill Clinton's for it. The Democrats, it's going to be good. Turns out Ross Perot was right about NAFTA. And Bill Clinton sold out the unions, and he cut them. He diminished them in a way they'll never be the same. That's why there's no union power in this country anymore.
He diminished them in what way?
Well, by doing NAFTA. So now when the union goes to negotiate, the corporation says, fuck you, I'll go to Mexico.
I'll go to Mexico, yeah.
And they either do go to Mexico or they fucking give them a shitty deal. So that's what's happening.
So
and
you're
Barack
saying that's
Obama
when the corner was turned there with the Clinton administration, or even prior to that?
No, that is when it is when it happened. So when Bill Clinton and Al Gore formed a thing called the Democratic Leadership Council, the DLC. This isn't secret. This is all known. Guess who was on their executive board? Koch brothers executives were on their executive board. That's when they decided to start taking money from Wall Street. They were like, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. So we're going to fucking start taking money from Wall Street. We're going to take money from the military-industrial complex, from big oil and pharma, and we're going to become the party of white-collar America, which is why you heard somebody like Chuck Schumer, who's the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, last election in 2016, saying we don't have to go after blue-collar voters in Pennsylvania. We're going to go after suburban white Republicans. And we're going to, he said, this is a quote, he said, for every blue-collar worker we lose, we're going to pick up 2 or 3 white-collar suburbanites in Philadelphia, and you can repeat that in Michigan and Ohio and Illinois. He said that. So that's the leader. So that's who, they're literally going after Republicans to put them in office instead of going after their natural constituent. That's how bad it's gotten.
Right.
That is how bad it's gotten.
It's good that you mention that, because I think that the brand of the Democrats is still what they're dining out on, or had been dining out on. In other words, what Jimmy's talking about is this is not their brand. In other words, they don't advertise this fact. It's all figurable. That is to say, you can easily look and see that this is the case. But the brand of the Democrats is still working class.
Because they speak the language of populism, but they don't legislate that way. So Barack Obama will say, I'm for a single payer, I'm for the idea, and then when he legislates, he's like, all I could get done was, was a right-wing health care plan. Which is, so my whole thing is like, if Mitt Romney would have won, we would have got Romney Gare anyway. I mean, it's like, and Barack Obama takes 2 wars, makes them into 7. We ran out of bombs in Syria. I just came off another podcast where the guy didn't know that. He didn't even know we were bombing Syria.
We've mentioned that on this show before, but it's absolutely true.
Dropping bombs faster than they could make them in Syria.
20,000, I think, was the number. Amazing.
And I don't remember us having that vote in Congress on whether to go to war in Syria. Do you remember that vote we had? I don't remember.
Seems like a lot of stuff's going on, and we don't get a vote on it. But now we'll get a vote on things, right, Jimmy? Because
oh yeah, certainly. But you remember? I bet you we'll get a vote on single payer. Right now, as we're recording this, the news is all about a gas attack. Russia did a gas attack on the rebels in Syria. Now, I don't know if you remember the last time they said there was a gas attack on the rebels in Syria, but it turned out it was bullshit. It turned out that it wasn't the Syrian government, and it turns out it was a false flag, and people said that gas came from Turkey. So, the Gulf of Tonkin. How many times do I got to tell people this? And I ask people,
Vietnam.
And so people who disagree with me on this Russia and Syria, and we got to be in Syria, and Russia's bad, and I say, well, why are we in Russia? I mean, why are we in Syria? And people either say, I don't know, or they'll say, for humanitarian reasons. Literally, I just had a grown-up person say that. So you really think we're in Syria because we give a shit about Syrian people? We don't even give a shit about our own people. There's fucking lead water in Flint. Half the country's poor. We don't give anybody health care in America. The fuck? You think we care about people in Syria? We don't give a shit about people here. So we don't. This is, again, Eisenhower's prediction coming true. His warning we didn't take, we didn't heed, which was beware the military-industrial complex. And they're running our foreign policy, right? And the reason why they want to get rid of Trump is because they were afraid he wouldn't go along with their foreign policy. Who knows why? I know that there is some deep state stuff happening with, and it happened with Obama, too, by the way. Like, people don't know, like, why are we in Syria? Why are we in Syria? Right? And why were we arming and training ISIS and Al Qaeda rebels? Why were we doing that? I thought that's who we were fighting. No, we were training them because they were fighting Assad. Why are we fighting Assad? Oh, because he's fighting his own people. Again, back to we really give a shit about Syria. You really think that's what's happening? You really think that's why we're training Al Qaeda, ISIS, Al Nusra? You really think that's why the CIA is doing that? The reason why do we want to get rid of Assad because we care about his people? So, of course, that's not. We don't care about people. We killed people. We did it in Iraq. We did it in Libya. We're doing it in Afghanistan, and we're doing it in Syria right now, and we're doing it because of a gas pipeline.
And explain the gas pipeline.
So they want to have a net. So, Russia's whole economy is selling fossil fuels to Europe, right? That's how they make their money.
That's virtually their whole economy. Yeah.
So there's this huge natural gas reserve, and Iran and Qatar and Saudi Arabia all fighting over it, and they want to bring the natural gas to Europe. Well, Russia doesn't want that to happen, and so the pipeline has to go through Syria. So that's why they're supporting Syria. It's one of the reasons why Russia is supporting Syria against the rebels, which are being backed by Saudi Arabia, the United States, Qatar, the same shit, right? And so we're fighting them in Iraq, but we're supporting them in Syria. We're doing the same shit that led to Al-Qaeda in the first place. We thought, we'll work with these anti-Russian freedom fighters. You mean Osama bin Laden? Yeah. And then he attacks Al-Qaeda. And where did ISIS come from in the first place? Like, ISIS came from when we invaded Iraq. We created ISIS. So, again, it comes back to us, and we need to get the F out of there. And the news does not tell you the truth about what's happening in Syria. The news tells you what the government tells them to tell you. And I played that stuff at my show about how John Kerry says the problem is that Americans don't want to send their people to die in Syria anymore. So now they show a gas attack. The last one was bullshit. I'm going to guess this one is probably bullshit too, meaning it's a false flag why would Russia do that? Why would they decide to gas some people? That doesn't make any sense. That sounds like a false flag to me, and you're trying to get people outraged so the Americans can send boots on the ground into Syria. And I'll bet you any money that's what's going to happen. We're going to send boots on the ground into Syria to try to overthrow Assad.
When the Doctors Without Borders hospitals get bombed, though, Jimmy, isn't that real news? That doesn't certainly necessarily favor our government.
That gets reported as an oopsie. I just had this exact conversation on a podcast with another guy, and he didn't even believe that we bombed hospitals. I go, we do it so much. It's not only a habit, it's a vice.
Now explain, it's interesting for all of us, explain why that the bombing of the Doctors Without Borders hospital actually can be seen, and I think arguably is, a deliberate act as opposed to an oopsie.
Well, because the Doctors Without Borders were calling the U.S. military when the bombing started and said, hey, you're bombing a hospital. So they knew it, and they kept doing it for an hour.
But why, what I'm getting at is, why would that be in the interest of the U.S. to do that?
The U.S. is working with people on the ground, and the rebels on the ground said that there were, rebels or there were terrorists at the hospital. And there may have been some, often terrorists will take over a school or whatever.
It's also the case that, you hate to say it because you always like to think that our country is on the side of right, but as you can hear, it's pretty muddy water at best. But those Doctors Without Borders, they patch up everybody. They don't just patch up the civilians and
they were upset
and the
that
kids.
they were. So some of the reports were they were upset that they were helping their enemies.
Exactly.
And so We literally bombed a hospital. By the way, it's not one, it's not two. It happens all the time that we literally bomb hospitals. I mean,
and the Middle East is just one place where a lot of stuff's going on, but it is a very important place because that theater, as they say in the world of military confrontation, that theater may be the place that blows up. It's like a next flare-up. I mean, it's already blowing up, of course, but it brings together so many different countries.
Yeah.
And so the potential for conflict and conflict growing is even greater.
Yeah, it's and again, your news media is falling down on the job, just like they fell down on the job before Iraq. When I say fall down on the job, they're actually not. They're doing what they're supposed to do, which is manufacture consent at the behest of the plutocrats.
Now, let's go back to the beginning, though, a little bit. Okay, prior to the election, you came in and you were quite vocal about all of the misdeeds of the Clintons, of Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
And you talked a lot about some of this that you've mentioned today on the show, which is that she's just a tool of the corporatocracy, the same way the Republicans are. It's a false distinction between the two parties in some ways.
Many ways.
In many ways. So people would perhaps say now, great, Jimmy, you got your wish. No Hillary Clinton.
Right.
This is Donald Trump. And you argued that Trump might be better, or at least I don't think you quite said it this way, so you can set me straight on what you did say. But there
would be a silver lining with Donald Trump, meaning that the left would wake up to the horrible policies that our left-wing government has been implementing, and that when Barack Obama does it, everybody goes to sleep on the left. But if a right-wing government does it, everybody's going to be aware of it. And there's many examples of this. For instance, the travel ban that Trump imposes. Do you know why those refugees are coming to America? Because Barack Obama bombed the fucking shit out of them. That's why. So you're upset at the travel ban, but you're not upset when Barack Obama bombs the fucking shit out of them.
But don't you think that's a part of the story that isn't getting down to people?
Of course it isn't. The establishment doesn't want. They like bombing the shit out of poor people in the Middle East, but they like to pretend they're good people, and we let them come in America. So that's what that still drives me crazy, that people are upset about Trump's travel ban, but they're not upset by the fact that we ran out of bombs in Syria. They're not upset that we fucking toppled Libya and turned it into a failed state and a haven for terrorism. They're not upset that we went into Iraq and we're still going back into Iraq. We just bombed 150 civilians in fucking Mosul last week. Again, we're not the good guys. We set the Middle East on fire. And we did it on purpose. And General Wesley Clark, famous video, I played on my show a bunch of times, but he was on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, and he tells a story about when he went into the Pentagon right after 9/11. And a guy, he wanted to go see some friends and what have you, and some guy calls him into the office and says, hey, look at this. And he shows him a list of countries that they're going to invade. It was Iraq, it was Syria, it was Afghanistan, it was Libya. It was like 7 of the 8 countries we've been bombing, and it was all on there. And he says, why are we going in there? He says, I don't know. It's like we don't know what to do, but we know how to topple governments. So that's what we're doing. And it's certainly at the behest of Saudi Arabia. And it comes back to the petrodollar. And we've been overthrowing governments in the Middle East since the CIA was invented. And they've been trying to overthrow Syria. We did overthrow Iran. That's how, people don't even know how Iran started, right? So Iran used to be a democratically elected government, and they want Mossadegh, and he wanted to export democracy through the Middle East. Well, the CIA and the corporate plutocrats, they're a little uncomfortable by democracy. I don't know if you know. They'd much rather have Wahhabism be spread over the Middle East through Saudi Arabia because they can count on them. To do the right thing, meaning oil, and so that's exactly what happened. And people don't know that we're the ones who are installing these right wing. We did it in Honduras. Hillary Clinton did it. We did it in Ukraine, right? We got rid of a democratically elected government. We installed a right-wing strong arm. And so we keep doing this stuff. We're not the good guys, you guys. I don't know, Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam didn't teach anybody anything. The Iraq War didn't teach anybody anything. All of a sudden, we're the good guys again. Libya didn't teach anybody anything. We're fucking full of shit warmongers. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars on war to fight people that aren't there. We're fighting ghosts. And we're inventing them. We invented Al-Qaeda. We invented ISIS and al-Nusra. We're now inventing this fight in Syria because we want to put a fucking pipeline through it. It's all invented conflict, and it's because of the influence of the military-industrial complex. And the media goes right along with them. Mark, isn't it amazing that the government literally has every email, text, and phone call you make, but they don't have anything on Trump? And are you kidding me?
Yeah, by the way, that's why it was so funny to me when the word came out and the righteous indignation that we jumped up on as a nation with Russia meddling, to use the quotes, in our election, when we are probably the biggest meddlers on the fight. Meddling in an election would be quaint compared to some of the stuff that we've done, right?
I played a recording on my show in the run up to the election of Hillary Clinton saying, well, if we were going to have elections in Palestine, we should have made sure we knew how they were going to turn out first. So that might be paraphrasing, but that's the sentiment. The sentiment was if we're going to allow them to have elections, we have to make sure we can control them.
And let me say one other thing about elections, just because I've never said it on this show before, and I really think it's important. When we talk about a democracy, elections really are a very small part of the democracy. What we really mean, and we had elections, you remember, in Afghanistan. I remember the purple-fingered Iraq people. We did the election there. Only classic political theater, because what you really are talking about is the rights of the people, right? The rights of women to attend school, the rights of every member of society to participate. That's really the fundamental notion behind a democracy. The voting part is kind of an add-on.
I try to tell people, what do you call a system that takes the richest country in the world, the United States, and renders half of its population poor, which is what is happening. About a quarter of them live in poverty. Half of them are poor. Those are two different classifications. And I call that a failed system. That would be a fucked up fail. Oh, that system doesn't work. We don't. And, people get mad at China. They go, oh, my God, China's stealing all our jobs. We are the ones who set this system up. We're the ones who gave tax incentives if you take a job and send it to a poorer person in China. The company makes all the money. You know who doesn't make the rest of the money? Any of the people in the United States, the 1%. So they still make the money. They're just they're paying the labor costs over in China. They keep all the money, and so it stagnates our economy, right? So you know how the way economies work is you have to have money in the pockets of people who spend money. When you put more money in the pockets of the 1%ers, they put it in offshore tax havens. They don't spend it. So it stagnates the economy, which is why the estate tax is such an important thing to get that money circulating in the economy again. It's called the velocity of money, and FDR understood it, a demand economy instead of trickle-down economy, which is where everybody sits. We give all the money to the richest people already, and we hope that some of the money trickle, please, sir, a trickle, sir. So which doesn't happen, right? That's been proven that doesn't work. So you put money in the hands of people who spend it. So there's a great saying I like. It's money's a lot like shit. You pile it up, it stinks. You spread it around and make stuff grow. And so what we've done is we've decided to take our jobs and send them to China. And then take the money that we make, because we make more money, the companies make more money doing that. Well, that money doesn't go to their workers or it just goes right to their investors. It goes to the 1%. So we're doing it to ourselves. This is our system. This isn't China's system. This is our system. And we haven't figured out a way to spread the money around yet. People keep saying we're going to have driverless cars and driverless trucks, and we're going to have robots serving us at fast food places. And the bad thing about driverless cars and robots is robots don't spend money in the economy. So that's a bad thing. We have to figure out people. You're starting to hear even right wingers now talk about a guaranteed income.
Even within this overall architecture, which you've laid out, there are real changes going on. Everything being done with the workers and robotics is being done so the company can make more money.
It's not so the workers could have more money. It's so they can now become more profitable. And where is that profit going to go? It's not going to go into the economy. It's going to go into the pockets of the richest people in the world, right? The people who run the company and their investors. They already have all the money. So there's this video we've talked about by, it's called the Banned, BANNED, Banned TED Talk. And it's a guy named Nick Hauser, maybe is his last name. He's a millionaire. And he talks about all that. He talks about, I can only buy a certain amount of jeans every year. I only buy a certain amount of cars. He goes, so it's better to give 10,000 people $100,000 instead of giving me $5 million. It's better to spread it around because then they're going to go out and buy 10,000 cars. They're going to buy 10,000 pairs of jeans. And that's how you stimulate an economy. And FDR understood that. And you put money in the pockets of workers and workers spend it. And that's how but the plutocrats don't like that idea. They want to keep telling us that trickle down works. Keep cutting their taxes.
I have one little piece of this history you're talking about that I want to get clear on. Then I want to ask you about what's happening on YouTube, and you have a whole YouTube channel and everything.
Wait till you hear about that.
I want to get into that in just a second, but there was the history of what you're talking about, which is that the Democrats slid over from a party that represented the people, from FDR.
It was an abrupt break. It was conscious. It was public. It was on purpose.
And again, the reason for that turn was?
Well, I can't tell you what was in Bill Clinton and Al Gore's head. I know that they decided to. I think it was Reagan scared the hell out of them. Like we can't. So they thought it was a good electoral strategy to get in bed with Wall Street, take all the money from the corporations, and then we'll do it on the social issues. Like we'll be pro-abortion, that kind of right to choose.
Right.
So we'll be pro-gay. We'll be more pro-gay than they are. We'll hate them a little bit less. Let's remember that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton didn't come around in gay marriage for a while, right? They were the last ones to the party. So that's what happened. That really did happen. It happened in the 90s, and that's when Bill Clinton, and you can't, I had this woman on, she's this city council person from Seattle, and she was on my show. Her name is Shama Sawant, and she said that, you can't be in bed with Wall Street and also serve the workers. And she made that point. She said, when we fought for the $15 minimum wage in Seattle, she said, I led the fight, and who did I have to fight against? The Democratic mayor. The Democratic mayor didn't want it. I had to fight against him. So this is what so she said, she had a great way of saying it. I'm going to butcher it. She's going to say, for movements, she said, like mine, the Fight for 15 or environmentalists or whatever, you're going to find the path for my movement leads to a graveyard inside the Democratic Party.
The brand of the Democrats isn't one that's embraced Wall Street. They're still trying to run against Wall Street, against the big fat cats. So when you talk about them having gone over to that side, they have from a policy standpoint. But the word on the street, if you will, is that the Democrats are still this party of the people, and that this last election was a referendum on having let the people down. And so now they're with this other guy who's a populist. At least he ran on all the empty rhetoric associated with I'm going to help the working class guy.
So let me say about the silver lining for Trump.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, thank you.
So a lot of people said before me, smarter people than me, Chris Hedges, Michael Moore, said that what the neoliberals are doing inside the Democratic Party, the corporatists, by continuing to turn their back on workers and letting their economic life go and get worse and worse and worse. Every time you vote for the lesser of two evil, their life gets a little worse, right? So they had predicted that what's going to happen is that a right-wing demagogue is going to rise up and take over, and then we're really in trouble. In fact, I think it was Chris Hedges who said, the next Trump won't be an incompetent like him, and he'll actually get elected, and he'll be able to implement his agenda. In a sense, we got lucky because incompetent Trump won this time. So now we get to reorganize the Democratic Party into a party that actually represents the people. So when Trump goes, we have something to replace him with. Because the mistake people make is thinking Trump is the problem. Trump is a symptom of a problem of both political parties turning their back on the workers. That's what Trump is a symptom of. So you can get rid of Trump, but if you replace him with another corporate Democrat, again, people who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution. That's a John F. Kennedy quote, and I can't get it right. Inevitable. Make violent revolution inevitable. I think that's the way it goes. Okay. So people they're not aware that people, how hard people are working in America, right? That they work 2 and 3 jobs and they still have to take half their medication, or they can't afford to go, or they put off doctor visits, or they can't decide between rent or medicine and sending their kid to school, or their kid goes to college and they're under a mountain of debt when they get out. It's all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And people don't realize, I don't think that the plutocrats don't realize how bad things are for the regular people. And the Democratic Party is not going to give up control to a progressive. So the silver lining with Trump is that people have woken up to the horrible stuff that our government is doing. So now they realize, we're banning people at the airports. Now it's just one more step to realize, why are there people at our airports? Because we're bombing the shit out of them all around the world. Okay, maybe we should stop that. And Barack Obama makes everybody asleep to that, right? If it was George Bush who took 2 wars and turned them into 7, people would be going crazy. If it was, anyway.
You're saying he was the warm and fuzzy black dude who came in, and so he has a certain, by the way, I mean to say that it seemed as though it was going to be a victory for those who have been neglected. That's why I mentioned his race, because you thought even in his race, this is a guy whose policies and thinking is informed by a lot of stuff that we've never had in the White House. And then, as it turned out, he didn't ever make the changes.
He was a corporatist all the way. He bailed out Wall Street. He did not bail out Main Street. He did not. In fact, Timothy Geithner, who was handpicked by Barack Obama, said that we feel that 10 million foreclosures we can handle. That was their plan. That wasn't a screw-up glitch of their plan. Their plan was to have 10 million foreclosures. That's what they did. And if your property was in a neighborhood that they thought was going to go up in value, they kick you out of your house. And if you were in a shitty neighborhood, they let you stay in your house. But if you were in I had a friend who lived in Santa Monica, and Steve Mnuchin bought his fucking mortgage for 30% its value. They wouldn't let him buy his mortgage at 30% his value, but they'll let Steve Mnuchin do it. So I don't know how we got off on this, but the silver lining is that now people are awake. Bernie Sanders a few weeks ago introduced a bill to let the United States import drugs from Canada. That's how horrible things are in America, that our big pharma has such a stranglehold on our legislators that we have to go piggyback off the welfare state of a fucking other country, which is Canada. So they negotiate for their drug prices, which is why they're half what they are in the United States and sometimes less, right? Well, we have it in the law that we can't negotiate for in Medicare. They can negotiate. So when seniors would go to Canada to get their medicine, the pharmaceuticals got their elected representatives to make that illegal. So now you can't go to Canada and get that money. So that's fascism. When corporations get together with the government to screw over their people, that's fascism. So Bernie Sanders a few weeks ago introduced a bill to let that happen, to let us import drugs from Canada. Cory Booker, a corporate Democrat, voted against it. In fact, it would have passed except for like 11 Democrats voted against it, corporate Democrats. So normally they could get away with those kind of votes, going with their donors and fucking over the people. Well, we're awake now because everyone's paying attention, and everybody made such a big stink. Cory Booker shit his pants. He took a meeting with the activists. He buddied up with Bernie Sanders. He was co-sponsoring the bill next time they reintroduce. So that is what's happening. So they know. So look, if you look at the town halls. By the way, they weren't able to repeal Obamacare. Why? Because people are awake and they're going to the town halls. And when Barack Obama was president, he put people to sleep. He said, "Hey, if union workers, if somebody's coming after your union, I'm going to put on a soft shoe and I'll join that picket line with you." Well, we all know he didn't do that. In fact, he did the exact opposite. When they were taking the union away from people and with the teachers in Wisconsin, he didn't even talk about it. Not only did he not go there and put on a soft shoe, he let it happen and he didn't say a fucking word. And when they poisoned kids in Flint, Michigan, he went there and drank water from a filter and said it's okay and left town. This is called neoliberalism. This is corporatism. This is why people voted for Trump. This is why half the country's poor. This is what's wrong. By the way, Bill Clinton had a secret deal to privatize Social Security with Newt Gingrich. That's another thing people don't understand. That's how far it went in the 90s. That's how bad the Clintons were. They passed that crime bill. They exploded the prison population at the same time they gutted welfare and repealed the New Deal banking legislations and passed NAFTA. Jesus Christ, talk about a fucking Ronald Reagan wet dream of legislation. That can only get done by a Democrat. And that's what's wrong with the system. And that's why I said I was voting for Jill Stein last time, because we need a Green New Deal in America. And the two major parties did not afford me an opportunity there was no way to vote against Goldman Sachs. There was no way to vote against more war. There was no way to vote against more fracking. There was no way to vote against the big pharma. There was no way to vote against the TPP. I needed a way to vote against that stuff. And that's why I couldn't support warmongering corporatists. And I had to vote for a Green Party, Jill Stein.
Because a lot of people say, hey, guys like you are the reason that Hillary Clinton lost, right?
And I say I'll take the credit. Mm-hmm. I'll take the credit because it's a good thing that Trump is there now, in a sense, because it was coming anyway. This right-wing demagogue was going to take over. The Democrats still have their head up their ass, by the way. That's how bad they are.
They haven't reorganized at all.
They're doubling down on their shit strategy. They're getting ready to lose again to Trump, okay? Let's get ready for that, right?
That's absolutely true.
So they won't even say single payer. They won't say it, even though it's more popular than Obamacare. Single payer's got a majority of the people in the country like it now. They won't say it. You know why? Because their donors don't want it. And if you want to know why the Republicans always stick to their guns and the Democrats always fold like jelly, it's because the donor class picks our candidates. You can't get elected unless you go to the rich plutocrats to get money to run. And they pick strong Republicans and weak Democrats on purpose. So it's worse than people think. Trump isn't the problem, and that's the mistake a lot of people are making. People get mad at me because I'm staying heavy on the Democrats. I'm pointing out the emptiness of their rhetoric, the emptiness of they have no plans. What's your platform, Tom Perez? He's the new DNC chair, and they say stuff like this. Well, we need to lead with our values. When we lead with our values and people understand we're the party of good jobs, and everybody gets a fair shot if you're willing to work hard. What the fuck? What are you, Ronald Reagan? Tell me what you're for. Are you for single payer? Are you for free college? Are you for ending the wars and investing that money back at home? What are you for? So that's what the Democrats, and by the way, Democrats aren't for anything. And that you for $15 minimum wage? Are you for card check? That's what another thing. Barack Obama could have gave the unions card check, which makes it much easier to form a union, and he didn't do it. I'm just telling people the sellout of the workers in America is way worse than you think. And both political parties are completely bought by the same people. Wall Street, military-industrial complex, big pharma, and Silicon Valley.
When you look at Donald Trump and this new administration, though, from the standpoint of the environment, which is my front and center issue, it's not even a horse race. But you take me on that, I think, as I recall.
So let me ask you this: the DAPL. So that pipeline. Oh, let's do the Keystone pipeline.
Okay.
So that takes oil from Canada, and it takes it to the Gulf, and where does that go? Goes to China, goes to the world market.
Right.
So it used to be legal for the United States to sell gas on the world market, oil, fossil fuels. And why was that? That was because we had a memory of what happened during the OPEC, the oil embargo in the 70s, right? So they passed the law that says the United States doesn't export fossil fuels. Guess who got rid of that? Barack Obama. And so that Keystone pipeline isn't for America. That frack gas that's going to go through DAPL, that's for someplace else. That stuff that's in Florida, they're putting they're putting a pipeline under an aquifer in Florida, one of their biggest aquifer. I was just talking to Tim Canova about this, and that's so they can take that and send that natural gas to China, right? And so that's not even for gas, not even for our country to be energy independent. That's for someone else's country. Now here's the rub. That natural gas that's going to China, it's going there to replace coal plants. So coal plants are worse than natural gas. But if you frack the natural gas, fracked natural gas is worse than coal because of the methane. Methane traps 80 to 100 times more climate warming particles than coal does. So it's complicated in a sense that it makes me sound like a conspiracy nut, right? Like, oh, both parties. Barack Obama, he seems so nice. I read a book called Listen Liberal. It was written by a guy named Thomas Frank, who wrote the book What's the Matter with Kansas? And he's an academic and a New York Times bestseller. And when he wrote What's the Matter with Kansas, meaning why did right-wing poor people keep voting against their own interests economically? So he went and did a book about it. Oh, he was on MSNBC every 5 seconds, right? He wrote this book, Listen Liberal, which articulates exactly what I'm talking about. What happened to the Democratic Party when they turned their back on workers, to Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama. What happened, right? They'll never have him on MSNBC. He never gets to ask. He never gets to talk about this stuff because it's the neoliberals. They're for the same thing. They're for more war. They're for Wall Street. They're for less unions. They're for more frack gas. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, if you read the WikiLeaks, Hillary Clinton wanted to be the ambassador for fracked gas around the world.
Yeah.
And she said she had a public position and a private position. So don't worry about it. If you hear me going out there saying something against fracking, fucking ignore it. Because the real Hillary is the one here with you, the donors, right now. And that was revealed through WikiLeaks, too. So that's why they got to talk about anything except what was in the emails. They talk about Russia, and they talk about the hacking, and they talk about Trump. And they don't want to talk about what was in there. Oh, it's an act of war. And it's none of that. It's a distraction from what was in the emails. And the emails revealed that Hillary's own campaign knew she was a weak candidate. Her own fucking campaign knew that. And they also revealed that they were in collusion.
That the Democrats were in collusion.
Yeah, DNC.
Yeah.
I mean, down in Brazil, for fuck's sake, Jake Tapper refers to what she did as horrific, completely unethical. Troubles everyone at CNN when she took a question from a town hall.
Yeah, I got a chance to see some of these if you want them type of thing.
Yeah, Donna Brazil gave the question to Hillary Clinton's campaign. She gets to stay at the head of the DNC. Isn't that crazy? Do you think if she did it the other way, they would let her stay at the DNC if she was trying to help Bernie? You think they would let her stay? No. So that's Donna Brazil, head of the DNC, caught cheating in such a way that it was too corrupt for fucking CNN. And the one before her was Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She also had to resign her position for corruption because it was revealed she was corrupt. So she was in collusion. So, and there's many, many ways the Democrats rigged the primary against them, right? Super delegates. What the fuck? They're not, and by the way, they're not getting rid of them.
No, that's a complete grab by the
super delegates,
by the party heads.
Who's going to choose your candidate?
Wins.
The people? Well, the people will choose our candidate. Then why don't you get rid of super delegates? We can't do that. So the super delegates, people don't understand. They come from, in case a guy like Bernie Sanders comes along and he's going to upset the apple cart and get rid of all these corporatists, get them out of the Democratic Party, they go, no. We have these other corporatists that we hand pick who votes against you. And that's exactly what happens. And then the media reports it. They're not supposed to report the superdelegate numbers until the convention. They report them every fucking time. Hey, Hillary Clinton lost by 10% to Bernie Sanders. Turns out they got the same amount of delegates. You how many times did we see that news story, right? So
the superdelegate stuff was revealed and talked about in a much more open way this past time than I'd ever seen before. But as you say, nothing's changed.
And right before they took the vote, so Keith Ellison backed Bernie Sanders in the primary. That was a big deal because no other Democrats would do it, even Elizabeth Warren. So every time Bernie went into a state, he had the whole Democratic Party against him. Every mayor, every state senator, every fucking city councilman, whoever was a Democrat was against him. Just think about that. And he still pulled 46% of the fucking Democratic vote in the primary. Think about that. He won how many? 22 states? How many states did he win? It's crazy the success that guy had. And all he had was a message. Because as soon as he stopped telling that message and he started to tell a Hillary Clinton corporatist message, he couldn't get 5 people to show up to hear him talk.
Right. Yeah.
And I got the videotape to prove it.
Yeah,
and they'll do anything to smear a progressive. First of all, they said he was sexist, right? Then they said he was violent. Now they're saying the latest thing is the people who supported Bernie were manipulated by Russia. Now we're Russian stooges. I just thought I was for single payer. It turns out it wasn't the free college thing. It was that I'm fucking stooge of Russia.
Well, the thing about Bernie going forward, had he become the nominee, was that they were going to rotisserie Bernie with a lot of stuff related to his communist roots, and they were going to try to tag him. I'm talking about the Republicans in a general election. They're going to try to tag him as a really seditious guy. You know, that this is a guy who really is almost un-American. And some of
unlike what they did to Barack Obama.
Right. No, probably.
I mean, a black guy with a Muslim name got fucking elected.
That's
we
true.
can elect a Jewish guy from Vermont.
I also think that's
bullshit. That's just complete bull. Oh, they're going to call him a socialist. Yeah. You mean he's going to have to run a campaign? It's okay. By the way, Bernie Sanders still by far the most popular politician in the country.
Yeah, you really get a sense that he could have won. Certainly, as Trump threw more and more bombs at his own campaign, you'd think. Plus, he could have answered honestly to a lot of things that Hillary Clinton, who is a shitty campaigner to begin with, she's a very poor campaigner, speaks in almost a
robotic.
She has sort of an Al Gore way about speaking.
Very Al Gore.
Very guarded, and she speaks like a lawyer. You know, like I don't want to say anything that.
Right, she's parsing her every word.
Whereas Bernie is straight out, speaks honestly, plain speak, but he still holds command of the stage. I think it was a real lost opportunity, missed opportunity.
The people saying that he would have got pilloried because they were going to call him a communist or a socialist, and then everybody would just get scared and they would vote against him. He went to a town hall in West Virginia a week ago, and I don't know if you saw it on MSNBC, but he got a room full of fucking Trump voters to applaud for him and single-payer health care. So fuck you if you think that Bernie Sanders wouldn't have beat Donald Trump, because the Trump voters would have voted for Bernie. They would have never voted for Hillary Clinton.
What is happening to you, the Jimmy Dore Show, which is not only full of this bileless rage that you have, but also full of funny, and you use their clips, and then you go off and make a point, but it's very fun, entertaining. You have 8 million views a month on YouTube. Imagine 8 million views a month on YouTube. What's happening to you and the world of YouTube?
I think that's better than Conan O'Brien.
Is it? Not that you've checked?
I'm teasing. I don't know.
What's happening to that whole world? Is that like just a big cash cow?
So a Wall Street Journal did a story recently and they were like, hey, let's take a look into YouTube advertising. And they found that on David Duke, his channel, who's a avowed racist, that there was commercials playing on some of his videos. Oh, look, there's a commercial for AT&T on a day. And they're like, what? We don't want our commercials associated with that, which is the wrong question to ask. The question you're supposed to ask is my advertising effective? Is it working? Right? But the people, anyway.
But to be fair, and this is
they overreacted.
But to be fair, I see. Okay, you're getting your point. But before you make your point, to be fair, if I have a company, and there are a lot of companies that don't want to be associated with certain things, like the David, I wouldn't want my. I don't care.
No doubt. But the point is that so what might have happened is that David Duke had if he does a video about racism or whatever, it'll get demonetized, meaning that they won't run ads in front of it. But like maybe he did a thing on puppies or kittens, and that might have got an ad on it, and that's what what happened? The response to it now. So a bunch of big advertisers pulled all their money from YouTube.
That's the overreaction.
And YouTube is the perfect setup. It's the way the news used to say they were. There's a firewall between the newsroom and the advertising department. Well, there really was a firewall between that. And like, I'm a YouTube content creator. Google and YouTube go out and get the ads and they place it. I never have a meeting with Google or YouTube. I never talked. I don't know what the fuck. So I don't know who the advertisers are even on my show. I don't know who they are. So we get to have genuine content that isn't So it's the thing that they used to say that the news had. We actually have it on YouTube, which makes this all the more tragic because now YouTube is overreacting. And if you do a show on news or politics, they have algorithms that'll catch your headlines. Like if you have war or Syria or ISIS or Israel or bombs or military, if it's in your they'll demonetize it right away.
And demonetize it means it won't be available
they won't
for
run ads on it.
Right.
They won't run ads on it. And so they're doing. So now here's a show like mine that actually would be doing videos that is against racism, right? So now I'm being hurt, right? So they're trying to get rid of racists. I'm a guy who's against race, so they're going to hit me too because of it. So they're really wiping people out. So right now, my channel's not making money, and there's a lot of people in the same boat.
And you went from making a lot of money. Because, the guys get 8 million views a month. Of course you're going to make money.
So you can imagine we made some money. And so right now YouTube is pulling our economic model out from underneath us. There's a guy named Kyle Kalinske does a show called Secular Talk. So he tags every one of his videos in the description, Secular Talk. Well, secular is one of those words, secular. So so now almost every one of his videos are being demonetized. So here's a guy who went from making big money, he gets 13 million views a month. He's getting $50 a day is what he's making now on YouTube. $50 a day. You can't run a company $50 a day. I hire people. I pay people top dollar on my show. I pay my editors the going rate. I don't have unpaid interns on my show. Everybody who comes on my show, the writers get paid. Everybody gets paid on my show. So I have a payroll to meet, and YouTube just yanked my fucking funding source out from underneath me. So we have to find a way to. It doesn't look like it's going to change. It looks like they're going to keep it that way. So they're going to monetize cat videos and how-to videos and cooking shows and stuff like that. But if you do a news show like I do, it's going to be. And so here's the thing: you go, well, Jimmy, how do they know what you're going to say about Syria? The problem is they don't know what I'm going to say about Syria. They advertise on MSNBC and CNN because they know what they're going to say about Syria. And they're okay with what they're going to say about Iraq. They're okay with what they're going to say about Russia. They're okay. They're not okay with what I'm going to say. They don't know what I'm going to say. They can't control what I'm going to. They're comfortable with their corporate news people, but they don't want. So we're getting fucked right now. So the great thing about YouTube was that you could have non-corporate news. Now we're getting fucked. They're getting rid of it. That's what it sounds like. They're trying to get rid of it because we don't have an economic model, how are we going to keep doing it?
What are the alternatives for you? Is there any other distribution area that you can
So my thing is that
toward?
now I have a big enough following on YouTube where I'll just ask people to support it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I have a premium program now, most affordable premium program in the business. And and so I'll set up a Patreon. And I'll just ask, and I think I have the people who view my show are coming because they can't get that information other places. So, meaning the way I talk about Syria, I tell people about that it's actually a fossil fuel thing again, and that we're actually training terrorists, the people we're supposed to be again, and they don't talk about that on the mainstream news. So people come to my channel for that kind of stuff, and for what I say about the Democratic Party, and I go against the establishment narrative. That's what people come for. That people saw in the Bernie Sanders primary how the mainstream and establishment news media skew everything and how they misframe things on purpose. And so that they couldn't believe it because people they got informed about who Bernie was and what he was for and what he was advocating. And then they saw the way the news media covered it and they're like, they're fucking lying. And that's why the Young Turks, which is an online news show I work for, blew up. We had 4.4 million views on election day.
Wow.
On election day. 4.4 million viewers on election day. So people started coming to the Young Turks for the real news about Bernie Sanders and the election, and they got it. And then after the primary, the Young Turks decided to be on board for Hillary. So their whole thing is they fight the establishment, but that one time they're going to support it because they felt that Trump was an existential threat. Well, I didn't. You know how I felt about that. And so then a lot of those people came to my show. Right. So that's how I built my following. And the people who listen to me, they come to my live show. So that's another thing I do that other people can't do. I can monetize by doing live shows and my shows are selling out weeks in advance now.
By the way, it's so much fun. Your live shows, again, are media that you weave into your discussion, which is funny, and then you have other panelists there too. It's really a funny show and informative. And you're saying now that's a hugely successful show for you.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? So I've had multiple Comedy Central specials, and it never got people out to see me in person like this. And so me speaking, and when I just threw caution to the wind and decided to speak from my heart and not worry about the consequences, it turns out I connected with hundreds of thousands of people immediately. And they're willing to, so there's a difference between a fan and a follower. A fan will cross the street to see you. A follower will drive 2 hours to see you. Well, in December, when I just first started doing live Jimmy Dore shows, there were people who drove from San Francisco, Las Vegas, Arizona, San Diego. They drove to come to that show. And I'm like, oh my God, I have followers. Wow. So that's different than a fan. And by the way, it's a group of like-minded people. People come to my show. We have alcohol and I tell jokes, but nobody ever has to get kicked out. You know what I mean? That doesn't happen. Yeah, people aren't coming there for that. People are coming there to have a unique experience. And, they're in a room full of like-minded people, and that never happens in a comedy club like that.
To see those dates, you go to jimmydorcomedy.com, and I guess more than ever, we need to support brother Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm not freaking out, Mark, because you know me, I'm a worrier. I have anxiety. I'm not worried. I don't know why I'm not worried. Like my total channel, they've taken away the money that I was making, and somehow I just have a feeling it's going to be okay, that my followers, or the people who like what I do, are going to find a way to support me. I don't know. It's weird. It's like I'm almost Zen-like calm right now. It's weird.
Well, I would say this to you, and guess I will say this to you, even though I always roll my eyes on the inside when someone says this to me. The universe will take care of you. But I think in this case, the universe of people who love what you do and appreciate what you do will take care of you. I really believe that. I can't get enough of you, and it's only time constraints that keep me from keeping you on, and your time constraints. I have no constraints, as you know. This is it. And when I'm thinking about $50, what did you say, $50 a day the guy makes?
Yeah, he was.
I wish this podcast made $50 a day.
But this isn't your only gig.
No. This is fine. I'm kidding. Yeah. We're on a different model. We're we just get it out there and hope people appreciate it. But Jimmy, always great
Thank you,
stuff.
buddy.
Yeah, really love seeing you. Jimmy Dore! Yeah!
Hey, everybody, why don't you do me a favor and like The Edge with Mark Thompson on Facebook? Yeah, that's going to bring in the kids.
Get more of The Edge on Stitcher and iTunes, or go to our website, edge-show.com.